Are you a woman in the corporate world striving to break barriers, challenge unconscious bias, and lead the way for women in leadership roles globally? If so, this is the podcast for you. Introducing Leading Ladies Who Lunch. The lunch hour is usually the time when colleagues get together for real, honest conversations about work, life, and everything in between. In each episode of Leading Ladies Who Lunch, we'll delve into insightful discussions and share actionable strategies to help you navigate corporate life. Co-hosted by me, Cicy George, a leadership development architect and inspirational speaker. I'm thrilled to share my experience and expertise on leadership, mentorship, and organizational intelligence to help you own your career.
And me, Rachel Lowndes, CEO and founder, imposter syndrome expert, and mindset coach at Rachel Lowndes Coaching and Consulting. Passionate about helping women conquer imposter syndrome and unleash their inner confidence to get the recognition and promotions they deserve.
Jam-packed with insightful conversations, expert advice, and inspiring stories from a diverse group, we'll explore how to overcome obstacles, shatter those glass ceilings, and build unshakable mindsets to unlock your true potential. So whether you're sipping a coffee or enjoying a meal at your desk, tune in for a no-host bar lunchtime chat. Episodes will be dropped every 2 weeks. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button.
Leading Ladies Who Lunch, empowering women, one conversation at a time.
Hello, welcome back to the Leading Ladies Who Lunch podcast. Rachel, so good to see you. How are you?
Hi, Cicy. I'm great, thanks. We're slowly slipping into autumn here in Sydney, which actually is my favorite time of year because, it's still warm and sunny, but much cooler than summer because summers here are ridiculously hot. And also the water temperature is perfect. So you can just get in, it's like a little bath. It's lovely.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I love fall, and we're finally starting to have some great weather here. It's warming up a bit in New York, and we've had a streak of really sunny, beautiful days. And spring isn't even officially started yet, so I'm super excited. But it also is a reminder that, we're not in spring. I'm inching closer to sending my oldest off to college at the end of the summer. And I really just can't believe how quickly the time has just flown. And, I was thinking about kind of like those early years of his life when he was really small and as a baby. And I just remember how I felt leaving my 3-month-old baby with a nanny who my mom had found through word of mouth, and she was someone from the community. And I was really nervous about leaving this infant, right? I was entrusting this other woman to look after my child. I didn't know her before we started working together, and she was going to have to watch my son for like 10 hours a day while I was at work in New York City. And then, of course, having to come back from work and take care of a baby, it's obviously something that a lot of women do, but let's face it, we just need to survive on 2 incomes. So, not returning to work wasn't exactly an option. But then I had to think about what I sacrificed by leaving him behind, and what a difficult choice that was.
Wow, Cicy, 3 months and back at work, like that must have been so hard. I mean, I actually don't know anyone who's done that, to be honest, but most people
Really?
here in Australia, yeah, most people here in Australia and the
Wow.
UK take, 9 to 12 months off, because the leave system here is much better. I know in the States that maternity leave isn't really a thing, so
Yes.
it's much better supported here. And actually, yesterday, Anthony Albanese announced that there would be a 6-month parental leave system put into place from the government.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, so I mean, he's very supportive of those female issues, which is great, you know. But I do understand the need to go back to work when you rely on 2 incomes, and I guess companies don't always appreciate how hard that is for a mother to return to work after having a baby, especially one so young. 3 months is so young. I don't think I could do that personally, but unfortunately, motherhood didn't happen for me. But as women, these are the choices we are faced with.
Exactly. And, it actually feels really nice to share that out loud, and just how I felt, because I don't think I've ever really shared how I felt going back to work and leaving my son with someone before. So that's why we're here talking about this and about the difficult choices that we've had to make as women that, has had impact on our careers.
Mhm.
So Rachel, as you think about your long-standing career, can you share with us some of the most difficult choices that you've had to make personally that also had an impact on your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think women in general have to make a lot of difficult choices across their careers.
Mhm.
Whether it's to pursue motherhood or in whatever form that takes, or even to take care of a family member who is sick or disabled in some way. I
Mhm.
mean, I know that my mother had to make a lot of sacrifices to take care of my brother when he became brain damaged and paralyzed after his car accident. That was a very big sacrifice that they both had to make. Um, and it's not only motherhood we have to sacrifice our careers for. Often we feel we have to be the ones who have to sacrifice our time and our careers for our romantic relationships too.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, you hear of many women whose husbands get better jobs and, they have to then move with them because their husband's job pays more. I mean, no surprises there with the recent
Right.
gender pay gap stats released in Australia. And let's not forget the plethora of female health issues are not even talked about in corporate life that they're just not set up to consider.
Mhm.
Although, this is changing now with policies being created here in Australia. I don't know if about the rest of the world, but, for like things like period leave, menopause, like having those kind of things happening to women, which we cannot ignore, right? But they happen. And especially as we've got women moving into the C-suite later in life, we have to kind of be cognizant of the fact that they do experience menopause, and menopause is hard. It's not an easy
Right.
ride. So I'm really delighted to see that type of thing happening, because this is obviously driven by those women who are reaching those C-suite levels.
Right.
They're like, right, we have to think about this now.
Again.
Yeah. But to answer your question, though, like the most difficult choice I made was to pursue the motherhood route alone. So that meant, I reached an age where I was still single, and I was, if I was have any chance of becoming a mother, I had to act and I had to go down the IVF route. Uh, so despite being in a job I didn't specifically feel safe or supported in, I just felt like I'd run out of time and choices. So I went for it, but
Mm.
oh my gosh, it cost me a lot, not just financially, but emotionally, mentally, physically, in the workplace, all sorts of things, and to top it all off, that job was the most toxic job I have ever been in. I wasn't supported. I told them what I was going through, right? And this was actually used against me as a form of a kind of threat, right? We know you need this job because we know you are on your own and you have to pay your mortgage and all that kind of thing. They actually use those words against me in
What?
meetings. Yeah. So,
Oh my God.
thinly disguised threat, although I don't know if it's thinly disguised, to be honest.
No, obvious.
Um, yeah, so it was never said in a supportive way. There's always this underlying negativity going on with it. And always in some sort of meeting where I was being reprimanded for really basic stuff that other people, seem to be getting away with. There's no stern words for them. I mean, I once got pulled into a meeting for rolling my eyes.
Wow.
I
Hey,
mean,
that's a waste of office time. I'm sorry.
totally, but they were building a case against me, really.
Sure.
But I was treated horrifically. One of the most difficult and emotionally soul-destroying times of my life, and I just felt very alone. Right? Thinking about it's really upsetting. I still get really upset about it. But I was literally shocked by what happened, and eventually that environment got so bad, I had to leave that job. So I had to make a choice to leave that job. And this was just before the pandemic as well. So at that point, I was completely done with advertising and trying to think about my next move because I was burnt out. But those choices around having to decide to do motherhood alone, that is a very difficult choice. It does affect your career. If you share that with your workplace and they use it against you, I mean, what's that about, really?
Right. And think about all the people who choose not to share it.
Mm,
and then they're something happens at work and they're being judged based on who knows what, and it's being held against them, and there's so much internal struggle happening. I mean,
mm,
I'm your story really does, it does strike a chord with me, and I can only empathize with everything that you've described. And the fact that you went through that alone, I mean, I hope you give yourself credit, because to have handled that, and I mean, just to go through IVF is one thing, but to do it while you're working in such a place as you described, I mean, we all know how damaging toxic work environments can be. And so, to have to go through IVF and also a toxic work environment really is just so emotionally tolling. But
mm,
I'm amazed by how strong you are. I mean, that's the thing about us women. We
mm.
don't know how strong we are until strong is the only choice that we have, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, I think my only kind of not comparison, but maybe a story that I'll share with you is, when before I became pregnant with my oldest, I actually did get pregnant before that pregnancy, and I miscarried at 25 years old. I happened to discover I was pregnant by chance, and within 3 months, I had lost the baby.
Mm,
And I was so young, right? So I wasn't planning on telling the office or sharing with my coworkers I was pregnant, because I just didn't want to share it. I didn't know how I would be perceived. I was still in that headspace of I wanted to climb. I didn't know
mm,
how this would reflect on me, and if they would
mm.
give me anything additional, with the assumption I'd be going on maternity leave.
Oh,
But
wow.
that was my choice, right? I chose not to share it because I didn't think it would be the right time to share it.
Mm,
And then when I miscarried, I also didn't want to share what I was going through, because it was, as you can imagine, really difficult and really private.
mm.
So I was fortunate to go on and to have my son a year later. But what I didn't realize was how horrible I would feel leaving that newborn in the hands of another woman to look after during the day. And I
Yeah.
worried about returning to the workplace and how that decision, I had to race home after work almost every day, how that had an impact on the whole trajectory of my career. Because at the age of 26, I would come home to my newborn and go on mom duty, while my other counterparts where they were putting in the office hours, and they were working late, and they were schmoozing the higher ups and getting that necessary face time that I wasn't getting. So I had to do in 8 to 10 hours what they were doing in 12 to 14 total combined.
Mm,
And I always thought about that on the train ride home, how I had to leave right at 5 p.m. or even a few moments before so I can get home. And I would miss out on all the necessary happy hours and after hours, conversations in the hallway. There was a
mm,
lot of good stuff that happened when I had to leave, and I
mm.
wasn't a part of that. So I had to decide on, would I become an absent-minded mom, or would I just have to settle for a just enough employee? And when you're trying to trying to rise in the corporate chain, it's really hard to do that. So I think about that, and I always thought at some point I would make that up in my career. It would have to be
Yeah.
enough.
I mean, miscarriage is another thing that women have to choose not to share, but it's a highly emotional charged thing. Like, it's a grieving process. And those after work conversations are essential for building connections and positioning yourself for those roles and projects that you want. I mean, the other
Mhm.
thing is, like, mom guilt that you're talking about here. It, like, that should be a psychological diagnosis.
Right?
It's
Yeah,
a real thing, and I don't think that we can discount that men feel they want to be with their kids too, and feel
sure.
a sense of, sacrifice about lost time with their kids, but they obviously don't experience that loss of career progression and the financial loss that women do too, not just in pay, but also in things like pension plans.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree about the mom guilt diagnosis. And I also didn't have anyone to turn to with how I felt, because all my
Mm,
friends were around my age and none of them were married, let alone parents. So I also felt isolated, in that way.
mm,
So if I had a mentor to turn to, that would have had already been through that, it would have helped, but I didn't have that either. So, that's why I just feel like we need to talk about these types of issues on platforms like this. So the women listening, who might be feeling the same way can at least feel seen and heard.
Yeah, I think as Gen X women, being heard and valued in corporate has been very difficult. And I felt that I had to sacrifice my own sense of self across my career. I didn't really have the confidence to push and to be aggressive, which is what our generation had to do to get the opportunities and higher level roles. It should have been given. It should have been a given for women in the landscape who, if the landscape were equal. And as I've
Right.
mentioned just now, Cici, as we've shared across some of our episodes, like that, the gender pay gap, the landscape's just not equal at all. And the battle just hasn't been won yet. We know that there are less than 10% of female CEOs in Fortune 500 companies and less than 3% of C-suite female leaders in creative industries. And the gender pay gap is going backwards here in Australia. So millennials and Gen Z women are likely, identifying with this too now, with all these stats coming out about the gender pay gap, which is quite alarming, actually. So we're still sacrificing so much just to get ahead. I recently saw a post on LinkedIn that a female CEO, Joanna Griffiths of undergarment brand Knixwear, raised 53 million for her business while pregnant with twins, right? Amazing, number one. And she made a point of rejecting any investors who had a problem with her pregnancy. Good on her, right? And
Right.
because her being pregnant didn't factor into her decision to not raise capital for her business. And her story just proves that we can shatter those norms around women as leaders who choose to be mothers in business. So, good on her. What a legend. And it proves that the fact that she's pregnant shouldn't even be a thing, right? Women
Right.
have babies. Corporates just need to accept this and get over it.
Absolutely. And that reminds me, so the former Pepsi CEO, Indra Nooyi, another Indian American, she was the first woman of color and immigrant to lead a Fortune 50 company. And she talks about this a lot in her book. It's called My Life in Full. And she discusses balancing a high-profile career with family life. She's a huge advocate for companies and government to, reshape infrastructure to support families. And in her book, she talks more about how companies need to support their people who have caregiving responsibilities. And I don't remember which panel it was on, but there was a panel that she was on once a few years ago, and she talked about how she had to remind her leadership team that when she became a CEO, her role as a mother wouldn't change just because she is a CEO. I mean, what a badass.
Yeah, love that. Love that. I mean, she's one of the top female CEOs in the world. So she has the perfect platform and the attention of people. So she should be standing her ground on this point, just for the rest of us, really. We need her to be saying this stuff.
Absolutely. So let's transition and give some strategies to some of our listeners as they grapple with having to make career impacting difficult choices. So if you don't already have one, seek out a mentor or a coach. And Rachel and I do offer, coaching services. So if you don't know have a place to start, you can always start there. But when you have a trusted guide like a mentor, if you're working with a coach, it serves as a great source of support for you as you come faced with challenges that force you to make difficult choices. They likely have had to make several difficult choices over their career, and they would have some great advice and they'd be able to share those stories with you. I would also add that having a mentor within your organization as well as a mentor external to your organization will be even better just to gain multiple perspectives. The second, have a sense of community. And for that, to join one of your company's employee resource groups, you can make some really great friendships, and the support you get from those relationships, who, by the way, those supporters will likely be familiar with the politics of your organization, will also serve as another form of support for you. And last, but definitely not least, you only get one life to live. So before you go too deep into worrying about the decisions impacting your career, also just think about what it means for your life and what it means to you. You know, you're the only person who really has to live with that decision. So you have to be okay with it first and foremost. And this is where I will repeat myself a little bit, but making sure you are living your life aligned to your values will really help when you're faced with making difficult decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say from, someone who did wait too long, don't hold off on motherhood for a career if this is what you really want, because
Mhm.
you only get a short window to do this in your life, as your fertility does drop off a cliff at 35. I didn't know that until I kind of went down this journey. So it's really
Mhm.
important to understand that it doesn't just like slowly decline, it drops off a cliff at 35. So if
Right.
it's important for you to do that, then do it, because your career can wait and you will find a way back. And we have lots of women who are now in these CEO positions who are forging ahead, just like Indra, you mentioned before, just like Jennifer Griffiths, who's like, I'm pregnant and I'm a CEO and I'm doing it, kind of helping to carve that way for us to get back into those positions. And there's lots of like initiatives here in Australia. There's Mums in Ads, there's recruitment companies that have policies around
Mhm.
working with companies to get mums who are wanting to get back into the workforce into companies. So there's lots of things happening with that. And so that story
Absolutely.
of Joanna Griffith from Knixware should literally inspire us all.
Absolutely. She is a pioneer.
Mm.
So you have to put your wants and desires first. Wherever you are in your career journey, our hope is that you can take away these insights from this episode. Seek out an internal and external mentor or a coach. Join one of your organization's employee resource or affinity groups for some extra support, and get used to living a values-aligned life, because your comfortability and ease with the decisions you make is really important.
Amen to that. And I'll reiterate that values and goals are important when it comes to decision making. Simon Sinek says, know your why. So if you
Mhm.
want something badly and you are connected to your why, then whatever it is going to happen for you. But come back to your why and the rest will follow. Never sacrifice what you really want for a career. You can always find a way back. And I'll also just leave you with this question, right? What difficult choice are you holding back from right now? And how could you find a way to make it work?
Amen. Amen.
Hmm.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Leading Ladies Who Lunch podcast. If you like this episode, we would be so grateful if you can share it with your friends and tag us on social media at Leading Ladies Who Lunch. Your reviews of this podcast mean so much to us. We'd love it if you can rate it and subscribe to the show.
Remember, you can find us and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcast platforms. Subscribe to stay up to date with the latest episodes and follow us on Instagram at Leading Ladies Who Lunch.
Tune in 2 weeks where we will be talking all about the limiting beliefs we tell ourselves. And Rachel,
Oh,
I have a ton.
oh yes, we do. Until then, stay sassy. Thank you for joining us on the empowering journey at the Leading Ladies Who Lunch podcast. We hope you've enjoyed our insightful discussions, actionable strategies, and inspiring stories that we break down during each episode. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to Leading Ladies Who Lunch on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And remember, the conversations you've heard on this podcast are just the beginning of your journey. Let your voice be heard, inspire change, and continue breaking barriers as you lead with authenticity, resilience, and unwavering determination.
Until next time, keep embracing your leadership potential, challenging the norms, and shaping a better world for women in the workplace. Leading Ladies Who Lunch, empowering women, changing lives.